I was going to ask you about the various species of bass there. I guess I've always kind of felt that if you came in to the weigh-in and you had to weigh in a smallmouth, it probably wasn't going to be very good. They just aren't very big there, or have you caught
Yeah.
any big ones?
Yeah, I've never caught a big one there. I could honestly say I probably have never caught a 3 pound smallmouth
Yeah.
there. I've caught smallmouth there and I've seen them caught, and I'm sure there's been some big ones caught there, but they're very rare they just are not thriving there. I don't know why they're not doing great there.
I
They
got,
just,
I think maybe the amount of spotted bass might have something to do with that.
it could be. It
Yeah.
very well could be that the spotted bass might just be just too hard on the fry. Um, I really don't know, but this largemouth, there seem to be coming back. I don't know if there's been any kind of if the Fish and Game has planted largemouth, but the largemouth are definitely starting to really make a comeback. You're seeing more, and you're seeing some really big ones, and you're seeing a lot of the from the spawn in the past. You're seeing the smaller largemouth pretty commonly in the last, and I've really honestly seen that in the last 2 years. You're very frequently seeing the largemouth show up at Shasta, so which is encouraging.
Is it? My experience on Shasta has been, gosh, it's hard for me to believe I haven't been there in over 20 years, but it's been that long since I've been to Shasta. It seemed like in those days, if you were going to win, not that I ever was, but you needed to try to target largemouth. Is that a thing at Shasta now? Can you actually target largemouth, or would you just be better off trying to find the bigger spots?
I think it would be really hard to target, like to go out and just target largemouth if you were going out there with a big jig and just
Yeah.
flipping timber or something like that. I think it would be really hard to. I think you could get into a situation where you've caught five largemouth, maybe throwing an A rig in the back of Jones Valley when they pull up, and you're catching them. But to say that you're just going out and you're
Yeah.
going to eliminate trying to catch a spotted bass and you're just going to target largemouth, I think would be really, I think that would be really difficult.
And
Um,
and, and to me, I think part of that problem is that you can't just throw a bait out there for a largemouth and without a spotted bass coming after it,
but
right?
and that's
Yeah.
absolutely correct.
Yeah.
There's not the maybe you might have some luck this time of the year because the water's really high. It's as high as it could, it's basically full. You might have some luck going into the back of those creeks and the willows and stuff are in a lot of water. Maybe, like I said, going back to a jig or flipping or punching, those kind of type of situations, you might get some largemouth, but you're probably going to catch spotted bass right along with them. They're just there's not that big of a population, and typically the guys that are catching the largemouth are targeting the big spotted bass primarily with swim baits. You're doing the same thing that you would do to target a big spotted bass. The largemouth are, the big trout, they're trout eaters is what we kind of refer to them as. And then the only time that you could target largemouth, if you truly wanted to target largemouth, it would be right now, as we basically in the next month, because they're spawning.
Yep.
Go look for big spawners.
Yeah. For people that don't know about Lake Shasta, I mean, it is still one of the all-time favorite lakes that I've ever fished, mainly because I can go out and catch fish there. Um, but a lot of times in my experience in tournaments, the 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 weights are stacked really tight together. In other words, 1 pound might separate 20, 30, 40 spots maybe, because it's just you can catch fish all day long, but they're cookie cutters, right?
Yep. I get this question all the
I'm
time.
sure. I'm sure you do.
This is like, how do you separate yourself? Yep.
That's exactly the next question that we're going with here is how do you get that separation? Because of all the people that I know that fish Shasta, you are a guy that has excelled at getting separation from these cookie cutter keeper bass to some of the big bruisers. How do you do it?
I would say probably area. I always try to put myself in areas that are, typically you can find bait and you can put yourself and you're in your, and it might be you know, that when you're in an area where there's a lot of bait, those fish are the same size of fish. Maybe they're gorging on bait. Maybe that goes from a, you know, a 2 pounder to a 2.5 pounder. You know, it might be a situation. I'm very, very focused on bait. Like, and then in the or late winter or early springtime, typically when all the tournaments are happening, I'm always looking for bait. And that's, I feel like is part of the recipe of making sure these, you know, you're kind of fattening up your fish you know, they're always around bait. The year that I won the One Bass Pro-Am, I don't, you know, I've done lots of articles and talked about it. There's tons of bait in the area. And I feel like those are the areas that are going to make those fish weigh quarter to a half a pound bigger. And then there's also a little bit of separation with you know, swim bait fishing. You typically have those, you're going to be able to get a little bit bigger fish, and that separates you a little bit. But if you're going through the numbers, I'm looking for areas where there's a lot of bait, where I feel like those fish are gorging, and it just gives you that little bit bigger across the board. And you know, 10.5 pounds to 12 pounds.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense, because if you catch five 2 pounders, which you can do, which I can do,
Yeah,
but if you caught five 2.25 pounders,
you're a
that's
pounder and a half heavier.
yeah, and
Or a pound and a
that's
quarter.
big separation. And then add a swim bait
Absolutely.
fish. There you go.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
that's really some valuable information right
Yep.
there. Ducket Fishing's Ghost 2. At $69, you'll think you're fishing one of those high price models that the other guys sell. Several powers allow you to find the perfect fit for your fishing application. Check out the Ghost 2 at ducketfishing.com. Why your next boat should be a Camus. Our hand-laid hull. 2 to 3 team members relentlessly roll out our fiberglass and resin, ensuring that your hull is laid consistently, reducing the risk of spidering and other hull malfunctions. Remember, our hulls are hand-laid, not hand-sprayed. I'm Keith Neiswanger. This is the Bass Tour Anglers Podcast. Please remember to like and subscribe. If you'd like to reach us, please send us a direct message on Instagram at Bass Tour Anglers Podcast. Take care. Be safe. We'll talk to you next time.